I'm Ethan, 34 male. I'm an architect living in a city that I helped in my own small way to build. My apartment is minimalist and ordered, a reflection of the control I like to have over my own space. For years, that control ended at my front door. Beyond it was a chaotic world managed by my family where I wasn't the architect of my own life but merely the financier for theirs. This is the story of how a secret, left behind by the one man who truly saw me, allowed me to finally draw my own blueprints for my future. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My life on paper was a success story. At 34, I was a junior partner at a respected architectural firm. My days were spent translating complex visions into tangible structures of steel and glass. I found a deep, quiet satisfaction in the logic of it all. The precise calculations, the immutable laws of physics, the way 1,000 tiny, correct decisions could culminate in something strong and beautiful. My apartment overlooked the city skyline, a constant reminder of the order I craved and created. It was my sanctuary, a place where every line was clean and every object had its purpose. This carefully constructed order crumbled every time my phone rang and displayed the name Mom or Leo. It was a Pavlovian response. My shoulders would tense, my jaw would clench, and a wave of preemptive exhaustion would wash over me. I loved my family, I truly did. But in the past few years, that love had become transactional and I was the only one ever making a deposit. My brother, Leo, 4 years my junior, was a perpetual motion machine of half-baked ideas and charismatic failures. He wasn't a bad person at his core, but he was allergic to responsibility. He drifted from one game-changing venture to another, a gourmet food truck that never passed a health inspection, a line of artisanal phone cases that cracked on impact, a vague consulting business that seemed to involve a lot of coffee meetings and zero clients. Each of these ventures was preceded by a period of infectious optimism and followed by a catastrophic collapse, and each collapse was cushioned by my bank account. The calls always started the same way. It would be my mother, Carol, her voice a carefully calibrated blend of concern and casualness. "Ethan, honey, how are you? You sound tired. You're working too hard." I knew this was just the overture. She'd ask about my latest project, feigning interest in zoning permits and structural load calculations before seamlessly pivoting. "Speaking of building things," she might say, "Leo is on the verge of something huge." The most recent something huge was a bespoke subscription box service for dog owners. Positively perfect, he called it. The idea, as always, sounded plausible in a 30-second pitch. The reality, as always, was a logistical nightmare he was completely unprepared for. The call came 3 weeks ago. I was in the middle of reviewing blueprints for a new library, a project I was immensely proud of. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. I let it go to voicemail, needing to focus. It buzzed again immediately. That was the signal. This wasn't a just checking in call, it was an emergency summons. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose, and answered. "Hi, Mom." "Ethan, thank God, I was worried," she said, her voice tight with manufactured anxiety. "There's a bit of a situation with Leo." A bit of a situation, that was the standard euphemism. It could mean anything from his car being repossessed to a supplier demanding payment he couldn't make. This time it was the latter. The company that produced the custom-branded dog toys for his subscription box demanded 50% upfront for the first major production run. Leo, with his signature blend of arrogance and poor planning, had assumed he could pay them after he'd secured a few hundred subscribers. He had 12. "He just needs a little bridge loan, Ethan," Mom explained, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper as if we were planning a secret act of kindness instead of enabling a 30-year-old man's financial incompetence. "He's secured a massive influencer to promote it. This is the final hurdle. He'll pay you back as soon as the first wave of subscriptions comes in. With interest," he said. I had heard that promise of repayment so many times it had lost all meaning. It was a phantom currency in our family's one-sided economy. I looked at the spreadsheet on my other monitor, a private document I called the Leo Ledger. It was a meticulously kept record of every loan I had provided since I started my career. The down payment for his car, which he later crashed. The security deposit for an apartment he was evicted from. The seed money for 3 failed businesses. The total was staggering. It was the price of a luxury car. It was a down payment on a second property. It was a future I was subsidizing for him while putting mine on hold. "Mom, I just gave him money 2 months ago for the website development." My voice was flat. I tried to keep the exhaustion out of it, but it was a heavy thing to lift. I told him then that I needed to focus on my own savings. This is where the second phase of the call would begin, the emotional manipulation. I know, honey, and we are so grateful for that, she'd say, her tone shifting to one of gentle martyrdom. I don't know what we'd do without you. You've always been the responsible one, the rock of this family. Your grandfather would be so proud. The mention of my grandfather was a deliberate, calculated blow. Grandpa David was the one who had encouraged my interest in architecture. He taught me how to read blueprints when I was 10, how to use a wood plane, how to respect the integrity of a structure. He believed in foundations, in doing things the right way. He was my hero, and my mother knew it. Using his memory to guilt me was her masterstroke. It's just that Leo has your father's creative spirit, but not his head for business, she would sigh, referencing my dad who passed away when we were teenagers. And he feels the pressure, trying to live up to you. This one small push could be what finally gets him on his feet. Don't you want to see your brother succeed? Of course I did. But what I wanted more was for him to succeed on his own. I wanted him to feel the terror of a looming deadline and meet it. I wanted him to experience the profound satisfaction of earning something through his own merit, not banking on a bailout. My help wasn't helping. It was perpetuating a cycle of dependency that was draining me financially and emotionally. But in that moment, with my mother's disappointed silence hanging on the line, it was easier to give in than to have the fight. The fight would involve tears, accusations of me being selfish, of thinking I was better than them since I'd become successful. It would ripple through the family for weeks, so like always, I capitulated. How much does he need? The number was $5,000. It wasn't crippling, but it was significant. It was money I had earmarked for a trip, a rare vacation I had been planning for myself. Okay, Mom, I said, the words tasting like ash. I'll transfer it. The relief in her voice was immediate and effusive. Oh, Ethan, you're a lifesaver, a true lifesaver. Leo is going to be so thrilled. We'll see you at the cabin for Christmas, right? It's going to be the best one yet. We can celebrate Leo's new success. I hung up the phone and stared at my computer screen. The clean, logical lines of the library blueprint seemed to mock me. I could design a building to withstand an earthquake, but I couldn't build a single boundary to protect myself from my own family. I opened my banking app, typed in the amount, and sent my vacation fund into the black hole of my brother's latest dream. The confirmation screen flashed, and I felt nothing but a hollow, familiar ache. I was the family's ATM, and I was beginning to suspect I was running out of cash. The first week of December painted the city in a festive glow that felt to me like a personal insult. Cheerful lights were strung across lampposts, and store windows displayed idyllic scenes of happy families. Every carol that drifted from a passing car felt like a tiny, jangling accusation. My mood had been dark ever since I'd sent Leo the money. There had been a perfunctory thank you text from him, filled with rocket emojis and promises of a massive return, but then silence. My mother, on the other hand, had called twice to talk about how excited Leo was and how this was finally it. Neither of them mentioned the money again. It was as if the transaction had been scrubbed from the family history, just another secret subsidy to be forgotten. Despite my resentment, one thing kept my spirits from completely flatlining: the thought of Christmas at the cabin. The cabin wasn't just a building, it was a repository of every good memory I had of my childhood. Tucked away in the mountains a few hours from the city, it was a rustic A-frame my grandfather David had built with his own two hands. It smelled of pine needles, wood smoke, and old books. It was where he taught me how to skip stones on the frozen lake, where we'd stay up late by the fire while he told me stories about his life. After he passed, the cabin became the family's designated holiday spot. It was neutral ground, a place where for a few days a year the tensions of our real lives seemed to melt away in the warmth of the hearth. I clung to the idea of it, the one authentic piece of family connection I felt I had left. I imagined the familiar drive up the winding mountain road, the crunch of snow under my boots, the moment of peace as I stepped onto the porch. I decided to call my mom to coordinate our plans. Usually I was in charge of bringing up the good wine and a few prime ribs for Christmas dinner. I dialed her number while sketching a new facade design, feeling a flicker of the holiday spirit I'd been missing. "Hi, Mom," I said when she answered. "Just calling to figure out the Christmas cabin plan. Do you want me to handle the prime rib again this year?" There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. It was just a fraction of a second too long, a tiny void in the conversation that immediately put me on high alert. "Oh, Ethan, hi honey," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too forced. "About that, we had a little change of plans this year." I put my pencil down, my stomach tightened. "A change of plans? Is everything okay?" "Oh yes, everything's wonderful," she chirped. "It's just, well, Leo's new girlfriend, Tiffany, she's an absolute doll, and her family is just lovely. They've never had a real mountain Christmas, and Leo had the wonderful idea of inviting them up to the cabin to experience it." She said it all in a rush, as if hoping the sheer velocity of the words would prevent me from understanding their impact. But I understood perfectly. "Okay," I said slowly, my mind racing to comprehend the logistics. The cabin is a bit small. Where is everyone going to sleep? This was the moment the other shoe dropped. Well, that's the thing, she began, her voice taking on that gentle, placating tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news. It is going to be a full house with Tiffany's parents and her brother, and we just didn't want anyone to feel crowded or uncomfortable, so we thought just for this year we'd have a smaller, more intimate Christmas. I waited, knowing what was coming but needing to hear her say it. The silence stretched. And I prompted, my voice colder than I intended. And she sighed, as if I were being difficult. We thought it might be best if you celebrated in the city this year. It would be so cramped, Ethan. You've always said you hate being crowded. We were thinking of you, really. It would be more comfortable for everyone. The words hung in the air, each one a separate, stinging blow. Thinking of me. They had taken $5,000 from me less than a month ago, the price of my comfort, and were now using my supposed comfort as a reason to exclude me. It was a breathtakingly cruel piece of emotional gymnastics. I had been uninvited from my own family's Christmas. I had been replaced by strangers. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You're taking my money to fund Leo's business, and then using the cabin, Grandpa's cabin, to entertain his new girlfriend's family, and I'm not invited. Now, Ethan, don't be so dramatic, she snapped, her fake sweetness instantly vanishing, replaced by defensiveness. It's not your money, it's a loan, and the cabin belongs to the family. We're a family and we make decisions that are best for everyone. Leo deserves a special Christmas. He's been working so hard. Working so hard? The phrase was so absurd I almost laughed. He'd been working hard at spending my money. And I asked. I don't deserve a special Christmas. After everything I do for this family. This is exactly why we thought it would be better, she said, her voice rising. You're getting so transactional about everything. You always hold what you do over our heads. Christmas is supposed to be about joy and generosity, not keeping score. The hypocrisy was astounding. She only ever called me for a transaction, but I was the one being accused of keeping score. I was being punished for the very role they had forced me into. I was the reliable, responsible son right up until the moment my presence became inconvenient. Then I was just a transaction that had been completed. The ATM had dispensed the cash, so it could be put away until the next withdrawal was needed. I couldn't speak. A cold, heavy rage was settling in my chest, pushing out all the air. I had never felt so completely and utterly used in my entire life. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my place. They had taken my memories. They had taken Grandpa's cabin and tainted it. I see, I finally managed to say. The words were clipped sharp. That's fine, Mom. You've made the situation perfectly clear. Have a wonderful, intimate Christmas. I hung up the phone before she could reply. I stood up from my desk and walked to the large window in my living room. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of festive cheer. I saw reflections of families in the windows of the building across from mine, decorating trees, laughing. I stood there for a long time, watching them, a ghost in my own life. The hollow ache I'd felt after sending the money was gone. In its place was something new, something cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. It was the realization that I didn't have a family. I had a set of dependents who had just unceremoniously fired me from the holidays. The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of muted misery. I went to work, I came home, I ate takeout, and I stared at the walls of my silent apartment. Every Christmas song on the radio, every commercial featuring a joyous family gathering felt like a personal attack. I declined invitations to my firm's holiday party and to friends' festive get-togethers. The thought of performing cheerfulness was exhausting. Explaining why I was alone for the holidays was even worse. Loneliness settled over me like a physical weight, a suffocating blanket woven from betrayal and resentment. On Christmas Eve, the city fell into a hushed quiet. The usual symphony of traffic and sirens was replaced by a gentle stillness. It was the kind of peace I usually loved, but that night it only amplified my isolation. I was about to resign myself to an evening of mindless television when a sudden, inexplicable urge struck me. I didn't want to numb myself. I wanted to feel a connection, however faint, to something real. I wanted to connect with my grandfather. His memory was the only part of my family that still felt pure, untainted by the transactional ugliness that had taken over. In the back of my hall closet, there were several boxes labeled Grandpa's things that my mother had unceremoniously dropped off after he passed away 5 years ago. You were his favorite, she'd said at the time, a statement that was meant to sound like a compliment but always carried a faint edge of accusation. You can sort through this old stuff. I had never found the emotional strength to do it. It felt too final, but that night it felt necessary. It was an act of quiet rebellion. If my living family wouldn't have me, I would spend Christmas with the one who was gone. I dragged the dusty cardboard boxes into the middle of my living room. I sat on the floor and opened the first one. It was filled with old woodworking magazines, yellowed and smelling of dust and time. I smiled, remembering his workshop, the scent of sawdust, the patient way he showed me how to hold a chisel. The next box contained his collection of vinyl records, mostly jazz and classical, and I felt a pang of regret that I'd never asked him more about the music he loved. Finally, I opened the last box. This one was different. It wasn't filled with hobbies. It contained more personal items, photo albums, stacks of letters tied with twine, and tucked in the corner, a small gray metal lockbox. My heart gave a little thump. I'd never seen it before. It was heavy and old-fashioned, with a simple keyhole but no key in sight. I rummaged through the rest of the cardboard box, my fingers searching for a key but found nothing. For a moment I was frustrated, then I remembered something. My grandfather had a saying, "Every problem is a puzzle, Ethan, you just have to find the right tool." My own toolbox was in the closet. I returned with a small hammer and a flathead screwdriver. It felt a bit sacrilegious to be prying open his private box, but my curiosity was a powerful force. After a few minutes of careful work, the old lock gave way with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid. The air inside smelled of old paper and cedar. On top was a framed photograph of my grandmother who had passed long before I was born. Beneath it were several of his old journals, their leather covers cracked with age. I set them aside reverently, and then I saw it. At the bottom of the box was a thick, legal-sized manila envelope sealed with a wax stamp of his initial, D for David. My name, Ethan, was written across the front in his familiar, strong handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. This was meant for me. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal and unfolded the documents inside. The first was a long, multi-page document filled with dense legal jargon. At the top, in stark block letters, were the words, "Deed of Title." I scanned the page, my eyes searching for familiar words. I saw the address of the mountain cabin, I saw the lot number and the county name, and then I saw the section titled Grantee. And there, typed in crisp, unambiguous letters, was my name and my name alone, Ethan James Miller. I stared at it, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. This had to be a mistake, a draft, an old document. The cabin was family property inherited by my mother after her father passed. That was the story I had always been told. That was the truth everyone operated on. I frantically leafed through the other papers in the envelope. There was an official, notarized copy of a section of my grandfather's last will and testament. It detailed the creation of a small trust, funded to pay the property taxes on the cabin for exactly 5 years after his death. The purpose of the trust, the will stated, was to prevent the property from becoming a financial burden on my grandson, Eds, and Miller during the early years of his career, and to allow him the privacy of ownership. 5 years. He had died 5 years and 2 months ago. The trust had just expired. The final item in the envelope was a handwritten letter on his personal stationery. As I read the familiar script, I could almost hear his voice, calm and steady, in the silent room. My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and enough time has passed for you to find it. I hope you are well and that the world has been as kind to you as you are to it. I am leaving you this letter to explain a decision that I know may seem strange. The cabin is yours, yours alone. I have made sure the transfer is legal, quiet, and absolute. I know you love that place as much as I do. You understand what it is, not just wood and nails, but a place of peace, a foundation. I love your mother and your brother, but I am not blind. I have watched your mother enable Leo's worst instincts, and I have watched you carry the weight of their choices. You have a good, responsible heart, Ethan, and I have always worried that it would be taken for granted. I fear they see your strength not as a gift to be cherished, but as a resource to be used. I wanted you to have something that was unequivocally yours. A sanctuary, a bargaining chip, a place to stand your ground. What you do with it is entirely your decision. Sell it, keep it, build a fence around it, it is your choice. Just know that I did this to protect you, to give you a foundation that no one could take out from under you. Be happy, my boy, you deserve it. With all my loves. Grandpa David. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through the tears that were now streaming down my face. The weight of his love, his foresight, his understanding was overwhelming. He had seen it all. He had seen my future, the path of resentment and financial drainage I was on, and he had built me an escape route. This wasn't just a deed, it was validation. It was the armor I never knew I had. I sat there on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the ghost of the man who had truly been my family's foundation, and I clutched the deed to my chest. The crushing weight of loneliness I had felt just an hour before was gone. It had been replaced by a surge of something powerful and new. It was the quiet, unshakable strength of a stone foundation settling into place. My family had uninvited me from their Christmas. My grandfather from beyond the grave had just given me the keys to my own. Christmas Day was a spectral experience. While the rest of the city celebrated with family, I was poring over legal documents with a level of focus I usually reserved for a complex building schematic. The initial shock of the discovery had subsided, replaced by a cold, methodical need for absolute certainty. My grandfather had been a meticulous man, but I needed to understand every detail, every implication of the gift he had left me. The world outside felt distant and irrelevant. My reality had narrowed to the crisp, ink-filled pages in front of me. The day after Christmas, as soon as a respectable hour arrived, I made the most important call of my adult life. I called Maya. Maya and I had been friends since kindergarten. We built forts in her backyard, navigated the horrors of high school together, and stayed close even as our careers took us down different paths. While I was designing buildings, she was constructing legal arguments. She was one of the sharpest, most no-nonsense people I knew, and the only person on the planet I trusted implicitly with this information. "Ethan, Merry Christmas. I was going to call you later. How were your holidays?" she asked, her voice warm and cheerful. The simple question was a gut punch. "Actually, Maya, mine was eventful," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Listen, I need your help with something serious, and it requires your lawyer brain, not just your friend brain. Can I buy you a coffee?" The urgency in my tone must have cut through because she agreed immediately. We met an hour later at a quiet cafe near her office. I had brought the entire contents of the metal box with me in a briefcase, feeling like a spy in a cheap thriller. I laid it all out for her on the small table, the deed, the will, the letter from my grandfather. I told her the whole story, from the years of being the family ATM to the final, brutal Christmas phone call. I watched her face as she listened, her expression shifting from friendly curiosity to intense professional focus. She read every document carefully, her eyes scanning the lines with a practiced efficiency that was both intimidating and deeply reassuring. When she finally looked up from my grandfather's letter, her eyes were soft with sympathy. "Wow, Ethan," she said quietly, "your grandpa was one smart man and he loved you very much." She then tapped a finger on the deed. "Okay, lawyer brain on, from what I can see here. Everything looks perfect. The title transfer is clean, the will is notarized, and the trust he set up to cover the taxes was a brilliant move. It kept the ownership change off your mom's radar. She probably just assumed the county was sending the tax bills to your grandpa's old lawyer's office, which was handling the estate. She explained that because the property was handled separately and passed directly to me via the deed upon his death, it likely wasn't part of the regular probate process that my mother would have overseen. It was a clean, surgical extraction of the cabin from the rest of his assets. "Let's be 100% sure," she said, pulling out her laptop. "I'm going to run a check on the county's public records database. It should have been updated when the title was recorded." She typed for a few minutes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she smiled and turned the screen towards me. There it was in the stark, bureaucratic font of the county registrar's website. Property parcel ID 74B3. Owner, Ethan James Miller. Seeing it there on an official government website made it irrevocably real. It wasn't just a family secret in a dusty box anymore, it was a public fact. I was the legal sole owner of the cabin. "So what does this mean exactly?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "In the simplest terms." "In the simplest terms," Maya said, leaning forward, "it means your family is currently trespassing on your property. It means you can change the locks tomorrow. It means you can put up a no-entry sign and they can't do a thing about it. It means you can sell it and buy a Porsche. It's yours, Ethan, completely and totally. They have zero legal claim to it." I leaned back in my chair, the enormity of her words washing over me. The power of it was terrifying and exhilarating. For my entire adult life, I had been on the defensive with my family, reacting to their needs, their emergencies, their demands. I was always playing on their field by their rules. My grandfather had just handed me the deed to the entire stadium. "He knew," I said, looking at my grandfather's letter again. "He said he was giving me a foundation to stand my ground." "He gave you more than that," Maya countered. "He gave you a fortress, so the question is, what are you going to do with it?" We spent the next hour talking through the possibilities. My first instinct was pure white-hot anger. I imagined driving up there right then, finding Leo and his girlfriend's family drinking my wine by my fireplace and throwing them all out into the snow. It was a satisfying fantasy, but it wasn't a plan. Maya, ever the strategist, guided me toward a more methodical approach. "Revenge is a dish best served cold and on official legal letterhead," she said with a wry smile. "An emotional confrontation gives them ammunition. They'll call you crazy, hysterical, they'll twist it. A letter from a law firm, that's not emotional, that's a fact, it's a consequence." She was right, an architect doesn't build without a blueprint. It was time for me to start drawing one for my life. We talked about the loans. I showed her the Leo ledger on my phone, her eyes widened. "Ethan, you've been incredibly generous or incredibly foolish. The line is a bit blurry," she said gently. But you have records, bank transfers, dates. We can draft a formal demand for repayment. It's unlikely you'll get it all back without a fight, but the act of demanding it sends a powerful message. The bank is closed. I left the cafe that afternoon feeling like a different person. The fog of hurt and confusion had lifted, replaced by a crystalline sense of purpose. My grandfather hadn't just given me a piece of property, he had given me back my own spine. He had armed me with the truth, and Maya had shown me how to wield it. The feeling of being a victim, a doormat, was gone. In its place, something else was growing, a quiet, steely resolve. The time for absorbing their chaos was over. It was time to start building something new, and the first step was clearing the site. The first few weeks of January were my planning phase. Just as I would with a new architectural project, I began by gathering information and defining my objectives. The end goal wasn't just revenge, that felt too small, too reactive. The goal was a structural change. I wanted to build a new life for myself on a foundation of self-respect and impenetrable boundaries, and that meant demolishing the old, rotten structure of my family dynamic. My first official step was to visit the county records office in person. While Maya's online check was reassuring, I needed to see it for myself, to hold a newly printed copy of the deed with my name on it. The clerk who assisted me was a bored-looking woman who probably dealt with property disputes all day. She typed in the parcel number, printed the document, and stamped it as a certified copy. Handing it to me, she said, "Looks like it's all Y." Ours, congratulations. The simple, official confirmation felt like a gavel striking down, ending a long and painful trial I didn't even know I was a part of. I now had my cornerstone. My next step was reconnaissance. I needed to know the state of my property. One Saturday, I drove up into the mountains. I didn't go all the way to the cabin. I didn't trust myself to remain calm if I saw cars in the driveway. Instead, I parked at a scenic overlook about a mile away, a spot where my grandfather and I used to stop to look out at the valley. The air was crisp and cold, and the pines were heavy with fresh snow. It was beautiful and peaceful. I could just make out the top of the cabin's A-frame roof peeking through the trees. My cabin, a fierce wave of possessiveness, an emotion I had never felt before, washed over me. This was mine to protect. This was the legacy my grandfather had fought to preserve for me. Armed with my certified deed and a renewed sense of purpose, I met with Maya again. It was time to draft the blueprints for my confrontation. "Okay," she said, "all business. We have two primary actions here, reclaiming the property and addressing the financial debt. I suggest we handle them in two separate but concurrent legal documents. They'll be delivered on the same day. It'll be a 1-2 punch of reality." The first document was a formal notice to vacate and cease trespass. It was a cold, impersonal letter. It cited the official property records, stated my undisputed ownership, and informed them that any and all prior permissions to use the property were hereby revoked. It gave them 30 days to remove any personal belongings they might have stored there, after which the locks would be changed and any remaining items would be disposed of. There was a sternly worded paragraph about law enforcement being notified if they attempted to access the property after the deadline. There was no emotion, no family history, no hint of the betrayal that had precipitated it. It was just an undeniable legal fact. Reading the draft, I felt a tremor of fear, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of rightness. The second document was the demand letter for repayment. This one was more personal, and it was the one I spent the most time on. With Maya's guidance, I went through my Leo ledger and my bank statements, cross-referencing every transfer. We created an itemized list, complete with dates and amounts stretching back nearly a decade. We didn't include small gifts or birthday money. We only included the substantial sums given under the explicit pretense of being a loan for a business emergency. The final tally was even worse than I had remembered. It was over $70,000. "We'll send this letter directly to Leo," Maya advised, "but we'll copy your mother, as she was often the one facilitating the request. The letter will state that while you have been patient, you are now formally requesting a structured repayment plan to be initiated within 30 days. Maya was clear that getting the money back would be an uphill battle. "The point of this letter, Ethan, isn't just about the money, it's about accountability. It's a statement. It says, I have the receipts. The free ride is over." Lord. Drafting these letters was a strangely cathartic process. Every word typed was a brick in my new wall. Every documented transaction was a reinforcement of my reality, a bulwark against the years of gaslighting and emotional manipulation. They had painted me as the cold, transactional one, but the evidence laid out in black and white told a different story. It showed a history of one-sided sacrifice, of my future being siphoned off to fund their present. The final piece of the plan was me. I had to be ready. Maya warned me that the moment those letters were delivered, my life would be thrown into turmoil. My phone would melt down, my email would be flooded, there would be anger, tears, threats, and a tidal wave of guilt tripping. "You have to be a rock, Ethan," she told me, her expression serious. Don't answer the phone, don't respond to the texts. Let me be the wall. Your only instruction to them should be, please direct all communication to my lawyer. Repeat it like a mantra. Any engagement from you is a crack in the foundation. They'll see it as a negotiation. This is not a negotiation, it's a notification. I spent the next week mentally preparing. I role-played the conversations in my head. I practiced saying, talk to my lawyer. I wrote down the reasons I was doing this and stuck the note to my bathroom mirror, a reminder for when my resolve might waver. It wasn't just about a cabin or money. It was about reclaiming my life from a dynamic that was slowly eroding my soul. By the end of the month, the plan was complete. The letters were printed on Maya's firm's heavy bond paper, signed and sealed in intimidatingly official envelopes. We sent them via certified mail with return receipt quested. We would know the exact moment the bomb had been dropped. As I dropped the envelopes into the mailbox, a profound sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't the anxious, resentful son anymore. I was an architect executing a flawless design. The old structure was about to come down, and I was ready to stand in the quiet dust and start building again. The 2 certified mail receipts arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. The green slips with the scribbled signatures of my mother and my brother were like a starting pistol for a race I hadn't realized I was running. I took a deep breath, went inside my apartment, and put my phone on silent. As Maya had predicted, the fallout was not delayed. It was instantaneous. My phone screen began to light up with a relentless barrage of notifications. First, it was my mother. She called once. Then again, immediately. A string of text messages followed, a rapid-fire progression from confusion to panic to rage. Ethan's called me now. What is the meaning of this letter from a lawyer? This is some kind of sick joke, right? Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. Then Leo started. His approach was less hysterical and more belligerent. Dude, what the hell is this, trespassing? Are you insane? You can't kick us out of our own family cabin. And this list of money, you were helping me out, it was a gift. The phone buzzed and lit up nonstop for over an hour. It sat on my counter, a furious, vibrating brick of their combined indignation. I watched it, feeling strangely detached, like a scientist observing a chemical reaction from behind protective glass. The anger, the entitlement, the complete lack of self-awareness, it was all there exactly as I had expected. There was no message of concern for me, no question about why I might be doing this. It was all about them, about what they were losing, what they were being denied. I let them burn themselves out for a while. I made dinner. I read a chapter of a book. The silence on my end was a form of power I had never wielded before, and it was intoxicating. Finally, after nearly 3 hours of their frantic, one-sided communication, I decided it was time. I needed one final conversation to close this chapter forever. I took a deep, steadying breath and called my mother. She answered on the first ring. Ethan, the name was an accusation, a raw cry of betrayal. What is going on? What have you done? I've done what I had to do, Mom, I said, my voice calm and measured, just as I had practiced. The letters are self-explanatory. Self-explanatory? You're throwing your own family out of the cabin where you grew up, where we have all our memories, and you're sending us a bill like we're strangers, after everything we've done for you. The sheer audacity of that last sentence, everything we've done for you, almost made me laugh. What have you done for me, Mom? Besides call me when Leo needs money, you uninvited me from Christmas. You made it perfectly clear where I stand. I'm just accepting the terms you've already established. We are strangers. You just want the family relationship when it's convenient for you. That is not true, she shrieked, her voice cracking. We were trying to make it a special Christmas for Leo. He's been having such a hard time. You are so selfish, so obsessed with your money and your success. You think you're better than us. No, Mom, I said, and the clarity in my own voice surprised me. I don't think I'm better than you. I just think I deserve better from you. I deserve to be treated like a son, not an ATM. Suddenly there was a shuffling sound, and Leo's voice, dripping with venom, came on the line. You've got a lot of nerve, you know that, hiding behind some lawyer. There's no hiding, Leo, I replied. It's all out in the open. The cabin is legally mine, and the money is a debt you owe me. It was never a loan. You offered to help your brother, he shouted. No, you asked for money to fund your latest failure, and I was foolish enough to give it to you, repeatedly. My help has enabled you to avoid growing up for the last 10 years. That's over now. The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing heavily, the gears of his mind grinding as he realized his usual tactics weren't working. The bravado vanished, replaced by the one tool he had left, panicked pleading. Ethan, come on, man, he said, his voice changing completely. Don't do this. Tiffany's family loves the cabin. We were talking about maybe having our wedding there next summer. It's the family cabin. It's for all of us. It wasn't for all of us on Christmas, was it, Leo? On Christmas it was just for you. You can't have it both ways, and you're right, it was the family cabin. But Grandpa David, in his wisdom, decided it should be my cabin. He saw this coming. He saw how you and Mom operate, and he protected me from it. Mentioning our grandfather was like throwing a grenade at NTO the conversation. It was the one variable they hadn't accounted for. Grandpa would never do that, my mother screamed, grabbing the phone back. He loved this family. He did, I agreed. He loved it so much that he took steps to protect one of its members from being devoured by the others. He gave me a foundation. He gave me a choice, and I'm making it. I could hear her starting to cry, the loud, gulping sobs of someone whose entire world has been upended, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustrated entitlement. So that's it, you're just cutting us off, your own mother, your own brother. That's it, I said, my voice firm but laced with a deep final sadness. You have 30 days to get your things from the cabin. After that, any and all communication must go through my lawyer, Maya. Her contact information is in the letter. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't want to hear the final accusations or the desperate, empty promises to change. I had said everything I needed to say. I ended the call. The silence that filled my apartment was absolute. It was a true silence, not the temporary quiet between their manufactured emergencies. It was the sound of a door closing for good. I walked over to my phone, which had already started buzzing again, and I did something I should have done years ago. I blocked both of their numbers. It was over. The final emergency call had been answered, and the only thing I'd given them was the consequences. The year that followed was one of profound and quiet transformation. The initial aftermath of the final emergency call was tumultuous, but it was a storm I watched from a distance. As instructed, I funneled every hysterical email and voicemail to Maya, who handled them with terrifying efficiency. There were empty threats of lawsuits, claims of emotional distress, and accusations of forgery. Maya dismantled each one with calm, factual responses and copies of the legally binding documents. Faced with an unbreakable legal wall, their efforts eventually dwindled from a roar to a whimper, and finally to silence. They retrieved their few belongings from the cabin a week before the deadline, leaving the key under the mat without a word. The silence they left behind was vast and at first unsettling. I was so accustomed to the background hum of their impending crises that its absence felt strange, like the phantom limb of a life I no longer had. But slowly, gradually, that unsettling quiet transformed into peace. I began to rediscover the parts of myself I had suppressed to play the role of the responsible son. I took that vacation I had long postponed, spending 2 weeks in Italy sketching ancient architecture and eating pasta without once checking my phone for a financial emergency. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from, realizing how much of my social energy had been consumed by family drama. My friendship with Maya also deepened. She had been my legal shield, but she also became my emotional confidant. We had dinner once a week to discuss the case, but soon the legal talk would end in minutes, and we'd spend hours just talking about life, work, and our dreams. She understood the complex mix of grief and relief I was feeling, and she never judged me for it. But the most significant part of my transformation took place at the cabin. The first time I drove up after changing the locks, I felt a tremor of anxiety. I worried it would feel tainted, haunted by the ugly confrontation. But as I stepped onto the porch, key in hand, I felt nothing but a sense of homecoming. Inside, the air was stale, but the spirit of the place felt intact. It was waiting for me. Over the next several months, I poured my heart and my skills into it. I didn't want to erase my grandfather's work, I wanted to honor it. I refinished the hardwood floors by hand, bringing back their deep, warm glow. I repaired the leaky roof, updated the wiring, and rebuilt the stone fireplace, making it safer and more efficient. As an architect, I was used to designing for clients, translating their visions into reality. This time, I was my own client. I was building a space not for a family that was, but for a future I wanted. Every weekend spent there was a form of therapy. The physical labor cleared my head, and with every swing of a hammer, I felt like I was rebuilding myself as well. I heard scraps of news about my old family through the grapevine. My mother had sold her house and moved into a smaller condo. Leo, cut off from his primary investor, had been forced to abandon Positively Perfect and get a mundane 9-to-5 sales job. I felt a distant pang of sadness for them, not for the life they were living, but for the family we could have been if they had been capable of seeing me as anything other than a resource. But the feeling was fleeting, replaced by the quiet hum of my own peaceful existence. As the holidays approached again, I felt none of the dread of the previous year. Instead, I felt a gentle sense of anticipation. This year, Christmas would be on my terms. I invited Maya to spend the holiday with me at the cabin. She accepted without hesitation. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after I'd sat alone on my apartment floor and discovered my grandfather's secret, I was standing in the warm, glowing living room of the cabin. A fire crackled in the newly rebuilt hearth. A modest, fragrant pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with old ornaments I had found in a trunk. The smell of roasting prime rib, my prime rib, filled the air. Maya was in the kitchen, humming along to a jazz record from my grandfather's collection, which I'd brought up from the city. We ate dinner at the old wooden table my grandfather had built. The snow fell softly outside the large picture window, blanketing the world in a pristine, quiet white. There were no arguments, no tensions, no underlying currents of resentment or obligation. There was only the easy, comfortable silence of two people who truly enjoyed each other's company. After dinner, we sat on the sofa in front of the fire, drinking wine. "A year ago," I said, looking into the flames, "I was the loneliest I've ever been in my life." Maya put her hand on mine. "And now?" she asked gently. I looked around the room at the warm wood, the dancing firelight, the reflection of the snow-covered trees in the window. I felt the solid weight of the foundation beneath my feet. This place, this feeling, was the result of a hard choice, a choice my grandfather had given me the strength to make. The revenge I had taken wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet and structural. It was the peaceful, unshakable joy of a well-built life. "And now," I said, turning to her with a smile that felt more real than any I'd had in years, "I'm finally home."